former alumni, and I literally just finished teaching a class, which is what I'll do a lot of right now. So I thought it'd be important to keep this appointment.
Awesome. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate that you have a lot to do. So I'll try to obviously get by of it, but make it a little quicker. And I guess we'll just go ahead and get started.
Awesome.
So before we kind of go into the interview today, I just to go over the consent form I sent you, just kind of a quick recap. This is really just a chance for us to touch base, see how your journey has been since we last spoke. The one thing I just like to restate is if there's any question you don't want to answer, don't feel the need to answer it today. Simply just let me know and we can move on to the next question. Does that sound good? Totally.
Sounds good.
Awesome. And if any point you need to end the interview for whatever reason, that's completely fine. Don't worry too much about that. Awesome. So before we proceed, did you have any questions for me?
Well, you're not the person that interviewed me before, so I'm curious. Is it a team? Like, what are you guys trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so before it would have been Diane, I believe, that interviewed you, correct?
Yeah, I think so.
So she was the kind of research assistant before. So the two head researchers, what they're trying to do is they were looking at how COVID has just really had an effect on businesses and entrepreneurs as a whole. So obviously, like right now, it's kind of like we're in the heart of COVID. It's really the best chance for us to study it and get to see kind of people are experiencing it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. I'm assuming they just hired Diane last summer because they had the first interviews, and then I'm not sure what happened with her. But this summer they hired me and another student, and we're kind of just conducting second interviews just to, again, now that a year passed, see how things have gone and kind of update from there.
Awesome. So who hired you like as a faculty, or I'm just curious because we're kind of setting up something similar in another program, and maybe it's an offline conversation, but the research within a economic or business context is like literally what I'm working on right now.
So like the professor that I'm working under, her name is Madeline Tubiana, and then there's Angelique Slade-Chance. And they are both, the kind of the head researchers for the project. It's under the Alberta School of Business. And
Cool. This is super cool. Yeah, this is an area of a big growth in my what I'm doing. So we're just actually trying to design some research design around some upcoming projects.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Okay.
Perfect. So just to kind of take you back, the last time we spoke, it would have been late August. You were kind of developing your cannabis venture, as well as you kind of had a pivot, also side business kind of with the mask going on. So perhaps we can just start from there. Tell me a little bit of what you've been up to since then.
Yeah. Wow. One foot in front of the other. Hey. Okay. So both of those have had their own, I'm going to say, wild ass life cycle that I could not have predicted at all when I got into them. And I guess COVID has really taught me is just take the opportunities that feel right as they come and go with the flow, and you will not know where it's going to end up. You're still standing at the end of the day. You're on the right track, I guess. So the mask thing. So what ended up happening, the mask thing was actually quite successful. We were able to bring a large quantity, a boat of masks, like thousands and thousands and thousands of masks into Canada in the early part of COVID. And they were distributed to the Women in Need, or it's a SAGES is the overarching umbrella for the domestic abuse group within Alberta. And how that had happened was I had heard them on the radio talking, actually the executive director of that program was on the radio talking about how they were considered frontline workers, but they were not really frontline workers. But their need was growing exponentially because of COVID. People were literally fleeing for their lives in domestic abuse situations with lockdowns happening. So they recognized that their clientele were particularly vulnerable, but they didn't have the right PPE to help them with COVID being a threat. So that shipment arrived, it got distributed, I got paid, everybody got what they needed out of that. And from that, that was the only mask that I did. That was the only order that I did through that. But in that project, I got connected with people that I'm now working with on other stuff in the cannabis industry. So it just led into a whole other realm of knowledge and expertise that I didn't have, just because I had to reach out and figure out how to do it with bringing these masks, these medical devices was what it was, into the country. And as a result, I'm now still working with the medical device people here in Alberta to develop a new product for the cannabis industry. And their expertise is like exactly what I need. It's the first for all of us.
That's so interesting. I mean, I was kind of just going through your last interview, the notes on it, and it just like it seems like the connections always seem to work out in some way, right? You're just able to kind of lean on something that may not look, it may not look like it could be involved at first, but yeah, it seems to almost branch out consistently.
Yeah, so that speaks to like essentially what I'm doing on the cannabis side is a consultancy. So I actually do very little consulting work for money,
Mm-hmm.
straight charging. I actually do it by connecting. So what that means is I have a massive network of people that I've just curated over my lifetime, and like they're all people that I love and cherish, and I keep in touch with them in various ways. And
Mm-hmm.
my brain tends to think of things that go together. So if I hear something new and I'm like, oh, this is someone that would know something more about this than I do, I immediately make that connection. So I'll
Yeah.
either introduce it or mention it to the people. I'm like, hey, I think I know someone that could help you with this. I don't necessarily know what the answer is. It's not my expertise, but I'll just introduce you to them, and in a warm introduction, either through email or LinkedIn or whatever, phone call, and then they sort of take it from there. So that's been a lot of the work I've been doing. Is essentially just like listening to people, being open to hearing their ideas. And if there is stuff, so I have been doing consulting in two areas that have been really strong, and that is in the business development, with like a strong business background. So in the cannabis industry, there's a severe lack of business fundamentals from like
Mm-hmm.
I have an MBA, right? So I did my U of A undergrad, and then I did my MBA at Queens.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a significant lack of business expertise in the cannabis industry. And I'm not talking about the people that were publicly traded. They don't know what they're doing for cannabis, which is why they're not successful. The people that actually know how to grow the plant and love the plant, and it's part of their lives because it's medicine for them. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
this big cash cow thing. They are the ones that need the help. And so that's what I'm doing now is that I've been literally drag kicking and streaming into British Columbia, which was not that hard to do because I love coming out here. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Victoria at the moment, and for the last several weeks, I've been touring around facilities that are just getting started, and we've joined forces with other consultants, and essentially joined a group of people together that are incredibly passionate about craft cannabis grown like it should be grown, healthy organic soil, a lot of low emission, low carbon ways that are incredibly simplistic in essence. They don't need technology, they don't need patents. They're just people are already doing them for other stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they're bringing those the real plant growth methods into the legal cannabis industry, which is sort of bastardized the concept of growing things from the state of nature. And so we're coming back together. So the green generation piece is like, how do you do this? What's green and sustainable and green for the planet? And I have a very strong business acumen that area has been of most need is in how do you get this business to be profitable? Because that has not yet been figured out by anybody, or
Mm-hmm.
very few have figured out how to have a profitable, year over year, a positive or quarter over quarter positive EBITDA business, which has not yet been figured out. So that's why I'm here, is to try and figure out, hopefully, that this is the way that we can do it. But we have to think very differently. So that's essentially what I've been doing the most of.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify, make sure I understand. So you don't have your own cannabis business where you're selling cannabis. You're more focusing on the supply side and helping like through a consulting style, helping those producers almost like learn how to generate a profit.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. I don't actually have a business where I make or create cannabis. I'm an ancillary provider of services to support the industry.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Perfect. And I guess, yeah, in kind of looking at it also from a perspective of COVID, how do you think COVID's kind of affected what you've been doing over the last year?
It wouldn't have happened if COVID wasn't here.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was like an incubator. It sort of it kept the lid on a bunch of stuff that was happening behind the scenes, over screens, over Zoom calls, without wasting resources like planes and trains and automobiles. And like in COVID, I would say I had more meetings in a day or hours of, like, if you want to do it in mileage and minutes of Zoom calls than I've
Yeah.
ever had in my entire life.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't always a good thing, but in this case, I was able to leverage my connections to make it a good thing, in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that I didn't have a lot of downtime. So, like, I literally, like today, back to back to back, like, barely get up for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's like being
Mm-hmm.
in school. You've got very few breaks. You're totally focused on what you're doing, and it's incredibly involved. Like, in a course of a day, so much is going on, but that wouldn't have happened if we were going face-to-face meetings and, meeting people in Toronto and here. So it's been efficient, and obviously carbon less intensive because they're not traveling everywhere, and really got a chance to sort of, I would say, keep the lid on some of the things from being prolific that shouldn't have been prolific, and really thinking about how do we do this differently so that as things are starting to open up and as things are getting better, I would say, we have a plan in place. We have, multiple revenue streams started so that any one of them will really help both the industry and myself really flourish as, things open up or become more, people can move around again a lot more.
Perfect. That actually transitions really well into my next question. So it kind of sits around like, a lot of us thought COVID would be over by now and kind of planned accordingly, knowing that kind of there's still a way to go. Even you were just mentioning, like, you have a few things planned. Could you just go a bit more into detail of what that might look like once we kind of do get past that hump?
Yeah. So that's my area of specialty. So I'm a business development strategist, which means whatever your core business is, I'm thinking of version 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as either an exit plan or as another way to make money from the existing resources that you have, so that you can easily pivot to the other thing should COVID close you down again and you are forced to stop whatever you're doing. So it's essentially by design, not the common way to do business. Usually when you go into business, you like have your core thing and you just do that and that's all you do. Because of COVID, that happens to be just a skill set that I have by accident or whatever. My brain thinks like that. Like, oh, you've got all this stuff. Let's make a salad. Well, you can also make a taco. We just need to add this one little thing. It's easy to get that. So that's how my brain works very naturally. And so what we're seeing is that's a skill set that is incredibly needed. It's a resiliency is what the concept of resiliency. And that, a lot of businesses are, waiting for governments to stop doing things. Well, government is there to protect people. They're not there to take away your livelihood. If anything, Canada's been the best case. Like, we're going to give you a minimum income, whether you like it or not, just go apply for it. It comes out of your taxes. So we're fortunate that way. We haven't had to hustle as much as other people in other countries. We've been able to sit around and not get sick, which is our benefit for Canadians.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what it is that my nature, my business just happens to be best suited for situations of extreme duress where your back is against the wall and you better figure it out or you're over. Game's over.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so going back again to, you mentioned last time that business-wise, COVID has almost created more opportunities for you than it has barriers. Can you share a bit of why you think this is?
I think I just said it. I mean, it's about the business resiliency. It's a mindset, right? It's like, oh, well, I can't do this. Oh, well, then I'll just go to that one. Like there's no barrier to change the turnstile. If you think about it, like you're going into an elevator or an airport or whatever, they have this big turnstile. It's like, okay, I'm going to go that way because that works, or I can go that way. That's just as easy or not that hard to get to. That's a mindset thing, and a lot of people don't have that mindset. I hear it all the time, like, well, no, we can't do it that way. We haven't done it. We didn't do it that way. So I'm like, why? Like, I just asked, like, why can't you do that? Well, what's wrong? Like, did you think about? So not in a quippy way, but in like, well, explain to me, why is that? Like, what is it about your thing that you're so stuck on that you can't do it that way? Well, that's the way we always did it. What I learned in my first career before getting into cannabis was from the oil and gas world. It was the signature of one of my clients on their, the bottom of their emails. The way that it was always done or something, or like that was the way we always did it. It was like the 7 most expensive words in the English language. So it's true. It's like, if that is the way you've always done it and you're not being successful, you need to change something. So if you don't change it, you just lost everything that you were doing, essentially. So that was a lesson that I learned when at oil and gas, where if you weren't thinking differently, you were out of business.
Mm. And do you think, just from your learnings over the past year, do you think your thinking has changed at all?
It's gotten better. So I've really been able to hone in on that skill. I mean, that I would say before COVID, I was good at that, but I didn't know what that was called. I didn't really have a name. It was like, it came out in meetings and in my success as a sales executive before I did my MBA. After I did my MBA, I didn't have a job. Like, I got fired from oil and gas, or packaged out, whatever, reorg, right size, pick a word. And was suffering from something that I was unknown to me at the time. And I did my MBA and then cannabis was sort of my answer because I was using it for myself. I needed it. I was using it as a tool for medicine. So it sort of just organically, I've honed in on like, what am I good at? Because I've had to challenge, like, how do I make money? How do I do what I'm good at if I can't do it in the company that I did it before? Like, and the oil and gas industry wasn't like posing a bunch more job opportunities in front of me. So I was forced to think of like, what is it that I am good at? I have a funny anecdotal story, which I think is really telling to this. So there's several different, resources. I mean, U of A, every school I've ever attended had like a career center, right? Where they give you some tests and tell you, here's what you're good at or whatever. In my MBA, we did a bunch of different kinds of ones, like Herman HBDI and other like sort of personality, but for the purpose of building teams. So I had a large, like I would say, resource base of these different kinds of like, how do you figure out what you're good at or what you should do? And I did the Gallup one. That was one I sort of as a go-to, like the strength finder. But the funny one was, I'm on the CRO website. I'm doing my CERB. Like I, collected CERB for a long time. And I was at the end of that page, it was a new thing. Oh, you can find out what a good career fit is for you. So I did that survey or whatever thing to figure it out. The thing that it told me that I was the best fit for, this is funny, I swear to God, be a fantastic escort. That is what the Government of Canada CRA website said. I should be an escort. I'm like, okay, thanks, Government of Canada. Got you there. I think I'm going to keep collecting CERB because I don't know if I'm comfortable with that choice. But that is essentially like how tangibly as a skill set, I don't like, what am I, but that's what the government thought I was good at. So what I learned from that exercise was, those things are bullshit. But actually, what it was honing in on was my ability to be functional in a duress situation. Because if you think about that as a profession, that's really what it's a resiliency. You're making money in the hardest of circumstances, and you're killing it, basically. So that's what I took away from that. And I think it's funny because I didn't know going into this what were the skills that I was going to develop, but I've learned them because I keep asking myself, what am I doing here that's working, and what isn't working, and how is it working? So that's what I figured out with COVID.
That's actually really interesting.
I have a follow-up to that story because it was so intriguing that the Government of Canada website did it a year later. So literally I just did it again, the same test, because I was curious. So this is a personal part of the story, is that in that time period, I was progressing from one like medication from traditional pharmaceutical drugs with a little bit of cannabis, and now I'm much more cannabis and way less pharmaceutical drugs. Mm-hmm. You want to know what the answer is now? I just did it a month ago.
Yeah, I was trying to guess. What.
So it's exactly the same thing it was when I left high school. So when I graduated from high school, I had a scholarship to attend McGill as a pre-med student. So the one that I did recently was doctor, surgeon, doctor, like all 80 of the top 10, like there's a 1 to 100. I'm like 88% should be a doctor. And with the cannabis plant, essentially I am literally counseling people on, from a business and a personal perspective, how to use this plant to make them healthy. So that was bang on. I'm going to say the escort might have been contrived by whatever else I was taking from doctors. So a personal anecdotal story of interest.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's the only difference I could come up with in that 1 year period, right?
So, that's quite a change for sure. Where was I? In terms of the cannabis industry as a whole, how do you think it's been affected, I guess, by the events of COVID and kind of the restrictions?
Opportunity for it to flourish under a set of circumstances where people really need it. Cannabis is a great anxiety treater, stress reliever, and people have to stay home. They couldn't go out and do stuff, so you can do it by yourself in your house. You can do it online with other people. I attended so many 420 events online. It was a standing thing in my calendar with different groups every day. At 420 in different time zones, there was some form of a meetup or a thing. So, it became a necessary part of people's lives, whether they liked it or not. And because in Canada, stores were still opening, even though they weren't, I'd say, open to everybody. It's an essential service. Cannabis became an essential service in a couple of days of COVID being, locking down. So those stores didn't close and essentially allowed the business to really get off the ground when everything else was closed, like bars, restaurants, or other, I would say, vices, so to speak.
So you found the business and the market as a whole like really accelerated because of it. Hey, just because having that
I
attention.
mean, there's no comparable because it's a brand new industry. So
Mhm.
I'm going to say we're still here. It's not perfect.
Yeah.
We're still the only. So what was thought was going to happen before COVID was that the U.S. would legalize cannabis fairly quickly, and there was quite a few people, other people that thought right. There was sort of the world decision was that okay, yeah, the U.S. is going to figure this out, and even if it was Trump or Biden and Kamala Harris said they were going to do it right away. So there was a lot of speculation that if that happened, Canada's game would be over in terms of a leader and a competitive leader. But it didn't, hasn't, still has not happened.
Mhm.
So that has helped us as Canadians really get our bearings. I'm not going to say we figured out yet, but at least we have a lot more intelligence on what people like, what they don't like, what the industry is capable of, what works, what doesn't work. And we are still the only G7 nation that has legalized it. So now I'm getting calls from people around the world saying, okay, we want to, like, what do we do? How do, like, we're another country. We are not the size and scope of Canada, but we look to Canada as a gold star of standard for safety and excellence in this protecting people from against harmful things. We have
Mhm.
super high standards for that. So that's what I'm getting consulting calls from international players with large buckets of money to figure out how do we make this work in their country. So we're exporting our expertise, not our products, at least not yet. But products are starting to happen. So we're building things like IP, technology, design, stuff that can be held as a patent and
Mhm.
kept in Canada, employ Canadians, and keep them in Canada, but then they're essentially exporting their knowledge and their information into systems around the world.
That's super interesting. I wouldn't even have thought of that.
I didn't
That's
either, but
yeah,
it's quite
that was
happening.
wow.
So, yeah. So yeah, there's quite a bit of a world audience, and also the other thing is that it would have come in anyways through like conferences. So conferences before cannabis, there were a lot of people coming in and like doing deals, right? They're like, okay, we're from a country, they're attending. So I
Mhm.
I met people at the conferences, but I couldn't see them again. Like they're calling from other countries, I can't go there. But we
Mhm.
developed these relationships over on like WhatsApp and emailing and just sort of keeping in touch in a more colloquial or casual way. It wasn't so business focused. It was just like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, what's going on today in the world? So that I think really nurtured that trust between other countries and what we're doing here and allow that sort of, and I don't know if everyone's feeling this way, but I have felt that I've had the opportunity to sort of challenge that status quo or the stigma that other people held because I'm developing these sort of more personal relationships with people about what are they dealing with right now. And
Mhm.
that helps me solve problems, right? That helps me understand like what is going to be the solution that's right for them or what are they dealing with now, even though I'm not talking to them specifically about business. So
Mhm.
it's more intelligence, and it's intelligence at a distance, but in a more casual way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
Yeah, no, 100%, 100%. So I think what I'm getting from you is like even just the having these connections and building them and having the ability to have these casual conversations, wouldn't have been maybe not possible, but it wasn't really thought of, back
yeah,
before the pandemic, right?
it
So,
was
so
it was forced. It was like, you have to communicate with people and sometimes you don't have a boardroom, you don't have a presentation, there's no deck, but well, WhatsApp is easy or, email is easy.
mhm.
So, and largely with company or countries that are entirely banned against cannabis at all. So they had to choose a platform that they knew was safe. Largely it was Facebook because that's what they could do. Because if they
Mhm.
talked about cannabis on regular channels, they would get blocked or shut down. So I thought that was an interesting, did not think of that at all. But essentially that's what happened. What's happened and it's really cool. It's super cool.
Mhm. Mhm. Awesome. So I guess focusing more on yourself and your journey so far, what do you think in terms of have you found any individuals or organizations specifically that have been relevant just in supporting you on your journey as an entrepreneur?
Other entrepreneurs that are sort of just a couple steps ahead of me. So I've really leaned into my network of people that are all sort of on the same kind of journey. We
Mhm.
try and keep in touch, and it's not just about keeping in touch; it's about inviting them in to your circle to give their lens on what's going on. So, perfect example. I just got off the call. We had our this course that I'm teaching at the Elevated Learning Academy. They're cannabis health specialists, and I just teach the business portion. So I was bringing in other business cannabis owners to show what their lens looks like to help coach these students on what for their business ideas that they're going to roll out as well. So giving that opportunity for other peers, people that are just done a little bit more, but just keeping that nurtured connection, that has been amazing. Um, the other thing I have to say is the openness of government and the openness of, I'm going to say, the international community to, again, like listen, ask questions, and have that candid conversation. Another great example of that, like same thing, but like there's a few organizations, like I would say grassroots. So like the BC Craft Farmers Co-op is one that I had joined sort of kind of as just sort of dragged. I wasn't living in BC at the time, but I had people that were, and they're like, you should join this, Malka. We think you'd be supportive of it. And because of that, I've now been with them for a year, and their agenda has gotten pushed to the top of the MP pile of the BC MPs. So we just had a meeting last week, and the BC members of parliament were on the call. And I didn't know that they were going to be there, but because I'm an active, vocal, and business focused member, I'm not so advocacy and like, oh, government is bad. I'm like, what is it going to take, government of Canada? What are the KPIs, the job numbers, the tax dollars? What is it going to take to put this on your agenda? Because they know it's important, but it's been advocacy. And like, so that was a conversation I did not know I was going to be able to have, but because of the nature of our world that COVID has brought us, sort of, we've really got to focus on keeping each other afloat. That presented itself, and I was able to make that statement directly to someone that can do something with that information, or have a conversation with them.
Awesome. And do you think, just going back to sports, do you think anything has really been missing, or is there a way that whether it be the government or any sort of supporting organization, you think they could be doing a better job?
In cannabis, or just in COVID, like in
just in generally in a COVID.
I think they're doing a great job. I think there needs to be more diversity of opinion and thought invited to the conversation. I think that sometimes people get really polarized. We've seen that obviously in the last few years, and silo. They sort of in these echo chambers, like everyone's sort of saying the same thing and it's bouncing around. Opening up the conversation, and because it's on Zoom, it's virtual, it's easier to do that. Like you're inviting someone in, but you can shut them down, if shut them off literally if they're really offending you. You don't have to be fearing for your life because they're on a screen. So I think having cross-functional conversations, bringing in the lens of someone else that may have a different perspective, that COVID allowed to happen. And I think there definitely needs to be like doubling down, tripling down on that in all areas, like not just in business, but people and other, it's really hard to plan for solutions for things of any, but government, especially when if you do not see the surroundings or the people that are doing what you're trying to make the solution for. So be able to see it and be that close to their situation to really understand like what are their pain points. COVID, I think, has allowed that to happen better than, everyone's working from home. So the first question, you probably see this too. The first question is like, at least this is what I do. If I'm seeing another person, everybody looks the same in the Zoom call. Like there's no differentiation of, in terms of your whatever, like you're not wearing a suit or whatever, like it's different. So I notice those things about people's environments and like try and build that rapport on that level. Because it lowers the barrier to the yes, no, or the yes, you can, it makes everyone is human living in the same box, but it's just their own box somewhere else. So that's something I think I've learned a lot of that really broke down some would have been way harder barriers to climb. If I didn't have the ability to see where they were calling in from, or see like what is their lens on the situation, and what is the shitty part of their day that they have to deal with. It's usually comes across if their kids are screaming in the background or, whatever. So that's something that window into people's homes, or their favorite background. You see a lot of people, like I have usually my favorite lake, which is actually a lake here. So that's something I think you would never have seen if you were in the same boardroom as them or, in that setting.
Interesting. Yeah. So you kind of get to see them from a different viewpoint is what you're saying. And even, not having everybody, have to be dressed up for work or something like that. You see a bit more of their personal side than just like
it humanizes the conversation. Like another good example, I was talking to the people at the bank, like RBC, like I'm trying to get $1 million commercial line of credit for buying equipment. And I'm talking to a woman, she's sitting in her kitchen, and I'm like, how's your day? Do you like working from home? She's like, I hate it. I don't have a car. Like I have to wait for my husband to come. Like she lost her independence as a person in COVID. She's a finance manager at RBC. Like, she does not have that power issue anywhere else in the world except in her kitchen. So I'm like, oh shit, I get it. Like, yeah, like I understand her, what she's saying. Like, that's dehumanizing for her role. But the fact that I was able to touch in on that allowed us to have a more personal conversation instead of her being the bank manager being like, no, you're not approved for your finance loan. It was that human piece that we miss when we sit in these office towers. And so I think that's been a good thing.
That's interesting. Now, you were mentioning earlier you got the chance to draw on CERB throughout COVID. Do you think this has influenced or shaped your entrepreneurship journey at all?
Yeah, I think we should all have a CERB permanently. Like, it really reduced the stress, paying the bills. I mean, it's not, I still need it. I still get it because I did my taxes last year and I got a refund even after collecting CERB. So I was giving back as much as I possibly could while I could, and thankful that I could, receive it, and helping other people that normally have never otherwise accessed government money for anything get it. And it just took that strain out of their life that would have killed them, like whether it be looking after their children or their ailing parents or dealing with COVID issues, or it was that lifeline of like, I just don't have to, like, okay, the mortgage is paid. Okay, next, that is something that universal basic income, universal healthcare, I mean, those are tenets of Canadian forever. And I think they should continue. But people still need to be employed and businesses still need people back to work. So there needs to be that combination of incentivize people to go back to work without causing inflation. So those are I'm not answering that question today, but I'm like, I've seen this. Like, I have had people, business, particularly restaurants. I know lots of people that own restaurants that I can't get staff. I can't get a server. I can get a hostess. I can't get anyone to show up to work because they're making more sitting on the couch. That's true, right? So the business model of CERB might need to change, or something has to change. But I think there is something there that gives people a bit of breath of fresh air when they really need it. And there's no guilt in taking it. It's not like it's a handout. It's like, everyone, it's okay. Like, we're here for you.
So you see the potential in almost it continuing past COVID, obviously, again, with modifications to kind of go against or to kind of solve the problems that you just mentioned.
I would support that. Yeah. Like, I would think it's kind of like another kind of a tax, I would say. It's just sort of funded. I mean, I'm a big believer that you help people buy their groceries so they can cook their own dinner. You don't just give them a plate of crappy food, right? Or the huge amount of fish concept. I think that in this society, when people are given that money, they don't go and waste. They couldn't go gambling. They could, they couldn't do the vices. They were impossible. So they paid their bills. They looked after their children. Maybe they got an extra comforter for their house. It wasn't like it was like spent frivolously, like that trickle down economics bullshit. This is how you help people. You give them money in their pockets so they're not stressed about paying their bills. If they have a little bit extra and they want to, treat their pain, well, cannabis is a very safe answer, and that's not going to kill them. So we saw, the opioid epidemic, I think, is a glaring example of the harm that drug companies have caused by misleading doctors. And, that was a conspiracy theory for a long time. It's not, it's true. They've now admitted guilt in more than one example that they misled doctors and patients for a long time, and to the detriment of millions and millions of lives. I can't say anything, but cannabis is the answer in that case for the opioid crisis. And a lot of people don't agree. They don't think that's true, and they're wrong. But the best example came out in COVID because of that.
What do you think, I guess, are maybe like the biggest barriers still to kind of get through that stigma of that cannabis kind of still has attached to it? How do you see kind of getting past that?
So what I've learned about dealing with stigma, I mean, it's my hashtag, cannabis is not about getting high. It's more about than getting high. You have to, with stigma, recognize is that stigma is essentially, it's a person's collective experience where they are at that moment in time. So everybody's stigma with cannabis involved is different. It just depends on their own lens and their experience and what they saw and what they learned and how it was, anchored into their head. So there is no one solution. The best way to get over that is to normalize it, which means that make it available to everybody, let it be everywhere. There has been no reported cases of death by cannabis ever, still to this day. Even in car accidents, they have not been able to say. There's been a lot of anti rhetoric around it, and even Mothers Against Drunk Driving, or their version of that is doing an anti-cat. It's lie. There's a lot of pressure against the industry to flourish because it's protecting another industry that has flourished for a long time. That's a conspiracy. That's true. Like, that's not. So the thing is that we have to recognize everyone has their own biases. How do you overcome that? You sit next to them and enjoy something with them together, so they see, oh, it's not going to kill you. Here, light up. It's totally legal. So, or, take it as an edible, or try it as a pain rub for your back. Here, Baba, here, Grandma, here's a cream for your knuckles. It will make your hands not hurt. Here's something for to go to sleep. It's just a gummy bear, or not a bear, but a gummy circle. Just try this, And then they have the best sleep of their life, and they're like, what was that? Can I get another one? I'm like, yeah, sure, they're at the store. $10. So that's it. They just, it's easy to give it away when it's legal. You just hand it to them.
Awesome. Now, I guess looking back at the past year, what do you think are kind of the greatest challenges you've faced as an entrepreneur?
Well, access to money. I mean, that has been, because of cannabis, the stigma against cannabis. Every single bank in this country has said no. Still says no. And then my question is, well, why? Like what is it about this industry that you are not willing to support? They said, we have not seen that it's profitable. I'm like, yeah, it's not profitable. You're right. So that's why going back to the government, like, what do you need to see to show that it can be successful? Like, you're getting tax dollars. Can you report on that? So here's an interesting thing. You know how, like, on the EI, when you no longer claim EI, it asks you, like, what job you went back to, or what industry did you go back to work in? There is no line for cannabis. So you know how many people that left work or got laid off because of COVID or other found another job in some form of the cannabis sector? How do you measure that if there's no checkbox for it? So you can't capture data like that to share with other groups if there's no place to put the check.
Yeah.
And that is a problem, right? That is a systemic, inherent issue that I'm collecting data and research on because it is incredibly important that you need to measure what matters. But if there's no way to measure, how do you figure out what matters? So that is an area that needs to change. And those kinds of changes are very hard to make, right? Like, how do you insert that box at CRA? I'm not sure who you'd call for that one. I'm hoping the MPs in BC are interested in helping me with that. But that's what I brought up on the call. I'm like, you can't measure this, but you're telling us we have to do more. Well, how do you know what you're doing if you have no way to capture that information?
Well, I again would have never thought of that. That's the interesting to. Yeah, I don't even know. I guess looking at the other side of the coin, what do you think have been some of your biggest wins throughout the year?
Well, I love telling my stories and what I learned. My family thinks I'm an idiot for saying this. I talk too much. They just say, like, you just talk too much. I'm like, yeah, but it's not about the talking. It's about what I'm saying, and that people keep wanting me to talk. So clearly there is something. And my husband's like, you're not making enough money doing that. I'm like, okay, well, you can go get a job. You can support that. So there's all of this sort of like pushback for stuff. But honestly, it's like we are paving way to something that has never happened before in our life, several lifetimes, multiples back. So the only thing I can say is the industry itself has found each other. In COVID helped that, I think, to find these new circles, like people that were not connected before. All of a sudden it's a Zoom call. All of a sudden you're talking to people in, other side of the country, all of a sudden around the world that share your common beliefs and values, even though they didn't grow up in your neighborhood. All of a sudden your identity is part of their group. And that reshuffling of our communities happened in COVID. And it's amazing.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think, even like if it would have even seemed feasible to even have this like conversation ourselves, like had Zoom not been kind of normalized, right? And then I've been interviewed for things before, but in this sense, it's like it's easy, like it's so easy. Here's a Zoom link, here
can I do it? Yeah. I do it all the time. Like I have a podcast, The Truth on Cannabis. I've just reached out to people, say, click here, we'll have a 20-minute call and I'll put you on YouTube. Oh, cool. So it's the content is not for the purpose of making a buck. It's about conveying a message of authenticity from the people that have that message.
Awesome. In terms of, have you found that there's been anything really surprising or unexpected about your journey so far?
I did not know where this was going to when it started. It's all been surprising. I had no concept of what I was going to be doing a year ago or a year and a half ago. I wanted to work for a big company. Like I was like, I have an MBA. I was really actually trying to work for a bank, particularly in Alberta, because they're quite interested in being like this, or the small treasury branch, ATB. I had a lot of calls with ATB. I had a lot of calls with the president, vice president, and director level of ATB. And I'm like, are you paying me for this? Because I kind of need a job. Can I work for you? And they're like, thank you for your information. This is really helpful. I'm like, what do I get out of it? So I wasn't in a job interview situation, but I'm giving them intelligence on something that's going to help their business, and was not remunerated for it. I'm like, fuck, really? So, and in some cases that was frustrating because I was applying for the job, in some cases that they were in and was clearly more of an expert in it than they were. That was very frustrating. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? I'm not chained to them. I don't have to meet their, I can say whatever I want. I am in this for myself. And because of that authenticity, other people found me and we like what you're saying and what you're doing. You're being incredibly authentic and credible. We need you to help us with X, Y, and Z.
Interesting. Yeah, it's, I don't know. I'm sorry, my mind's going blank right now, but it's just.
I hope I'm not messing up your flow.
I appreciate you sharing. I'm just, my mind's running a mile a minute right now. Just trying to keep up. Now, focusing, we would have asked you in the past, but now that a year has passed, what do you think today? What do you think entrepreneurship means to you?
I'm living it. I'm hustling and flow. Get enough sleep. That's a big one. Don't forget to shower. That's important too. Stand up and stretch. Entrepreneurship is about living your passion and your dream. And don't forget the basic life things along the way, because those can sometimes trip you up if you don't do them. That's what it is. It's about entrepreneurship is an attitude. It's a mentality. It's not anything else. So if you don't have it, you don't have it. If you want it, you got to prove it.
And how has COVID-19 shaped your perspective on entrepreneurship?
There are a lot more entrepreneurial people out there than I once thought. I think everyone wants to be. So this is the thing. An entrepreneur is a self-declared title. There's no degree for entrepreneurism. There's the School of Life. I've seen lots of people put that as their job title, the School of Life or the School of Hard Knocks. Entrepreneurialism and being an entrepreneur is about figuring out how to make what you love doing into a thing that makes money. It could take you a long time to do that, but I think COVID has proven that it doesn't have to take a long time. It's just about how you find the path of least resistance to the cash, or the not to the cash, the ability to sustain your lifestyle.
And then now, looking forward at kind of your journey, what do you think are the next steps, kind of moving into the next year?
One of the things I really was hoping was not going to happen was that we just all jump on planes and reverse the climate resettling that we had.
Yeah.
I hope Canada's borders stay closed longer, honestly, for the sake of Canadians and other people. I think it's been really refreshing to say, sorry, I can't travel. I would rather, have a Zoom call and still get paid the same amount, or, I'm going to not come to your conference because I can't leave the country and because we're not all vaccinated yet. I think there's somewhat of an exclusivity around that. That's kind of a blessing. It's like we're allowed to say that. Maybe that's a little bit twisted, but I don't know. I kind of like that excuse. I don't really want to have to go anywhere. What I have done is a ton of travel in my own country. We have been back and forth between Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba even. We went as far as Manitoba, without borders closing. And I spent a lot of time on the road seeing parts of the country that I've never seen before because we never drove there. So I love that. And COVID opening up again might change that. But I said to my business partner, like, we're not flying anywhere. Like, unless it's a private jet, I am not getting on a commercial flight.
Mm-hmm.
So get the private jet. So, or we're not going to go unless we can afford it or something else. That's what I mean. It's like the concept of travel became so embedded in our society, but kind of waste. And
Mm-hmm.
it, as Canadians, like I'm looking out my window right now at the harbor in Victoria, where the Parliament building. I've never seen that before this trip. Gorgeous, like it's like the most beautiful place I've ever seen. It's
Mm-hmm.
and I think the beauty of our own land is superior to a lot of other places, and we forget that because we don't go there. This has allowed us to do that, and I'd like that to stay. I'd like people to stay local as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I guess, well, that actually concludes my questions for today. I guess before I let you leave, I just want to ask if there's anything that you think I didn't ask or I missed today regarding the impact of COVID on your relationship with entrepreneurship as a career path.
I think they're good questions. I mean, I think there should be more of this kind of stuff out there. Like at least either with COVID or really the alumni U of A. Like I tried to speak at U of A. Well, we actually got shut down right because of COVID. I was invited to come and speak at a class. But I think as alumni, particularly with the fact that the price of tuition is going up through the friggin' roof, and there's a lot of talent in this province that, as alumni, business people, like I got a lot of calls for donations. I think this is more impactful. Like, let's figure out, like, like if you said to me, like, you did this research, would you be interested in interviewing 5 other people, and helping us grow this concept? Or can you take on a student that might be able to, so like I would take on 10 students tomorrow for market research for what I'm doing because they came from the U of A. We're all alumni. Is that a possibility? Because that's what I would like to do.
Yeah.
That would be really helpful for me. It would support their learning. I'm taking 4 practicum students from this courses that I'm teaching and 3 others from NATE because they reached out to me about the new materials because they couldn't find jobs anywhere else. So I was a student of U of A in the Bachelor of Commerce co-op program. I could not have learned more working with GE and Acklands Granger, my co-op, and I'm paying it forward because it was the best schooling that I ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And those programs they're available, but they're not designed in the same way. So
Yeah.
people cannot find jobs for their co-ops and their practicums in the field of study that they are in. And that is a detriment to the entire university concept.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. Awesome. Well, that's it for me today. I really appreciate your time and I learned a lot. So I thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you